Yeah, my name's Wei, and I'll be giving a talk for the next hour or so, a couple of hours. The talk is called 2012 and the Fractal Brain Theory. And it's all about the brain, mind, and consciousness. Now this thing you see as you're waiting for the talk to begin, that's actually my brain. Scanned a few years ago. Now, a few years back, life was really cheap, and I would do anything for a couple of bucks. And one of the things I would do is have my brain scanned for £30, £40. You kind of go into a scan and listen to some Mozart and some goth music, and you rate it depressing or sad, and they scan your brain. You press a little mouse in a little mirror. And if you're more adventurous, you can get more money from doing, say, 3 double-blind trials, and they stick a catheter in your arm, and they put drugs into your brain. So one trial I did was to test memory drug for schizophrenics. So I had to give you a drug to make you schizophrenic, and then another drug to double-blind study to boost your memory. And so that's hundreds of pounds. And for thousands of pounds, you could do studies where you stayed for several days, and they took a spinal tap, and you had to sign a waiver clause in the contract. So maybe about £4,000 in a week. But if they waive the right to sue, you could be paralysed from the waist down, kind of chance in 1,000, and you waive your right to sue. And the experiment could also turn into Elephant Man. So, but yeah, I never did that. I had a friend who did that, did these experiments, and he's dead now. Of other causes, not of that, but I mean, he was reckless. I mean, but the upshot is I got these brain scans. And I tell you, the feeling I got when I received the attachment of my own brain through the email, and I looked at it, I mean, really, after spending so much time in my life, decades, thinking about the brain, literally the hairs on the back of my neck, ding, kind of, there's your brain, that's my brain. Amazing, surreal experience. Anyway, so we're going to explain the brain. The brain is probably the most complex object in the universe. Tens of billions of neurons, tens of trillions of synapses, 100,000 kilometers of wiring in your skull. Incredibly complex object, but there's a way of looking at the brain which makes it seem far more understandable. In fact, behind all that complexity is an amazing simplicity, and that simplicity is because the brain is fractal. So I'm going to explain what fractal means and then show how the brain is a fractal computing architecture. So, okay, preliminaries. Fractal means, if you can all see that diagram, fractal means that something is self-similar. Now, there's a concept of symmetry, which you all learned in O-level, it shows my age, kind of GCSE mathematics. If you take that shape there, which is shaped like a brain. Now, if I translate it over there, it's basically translation symmetry. It's basically the same shape that's been moved over there. So, okay, I've moved it over there. Now, that's rotation symmetry. So it's the same shape that's been rotated. And here we have reflection symmetry, and you can combine the transformations. So you can translate, but then I've translated it. I've also scaled it. Then I've translated it, scaled it, and rotated it. Now, if I take the same shape, if I make smaller copies of itself and I put it inside itself, okay, like we have here. Now that looks a bit more complex, but you see, it's basically the same shape, but I've made smaller copies of itself and I put it inside itself. So it's self-similar. The copies inside itself look like the whole. Now, if I do that again and again, that's called recursivity. I'm recursively doing the same process again and again and again. I can take that process to infinity. And this property of self-similarity, nesting and recursivity, is called fractal. So that fractal object is basically self-similar. The parts look like the whole. Just to reinforce the point, say the classical nested Russian dolls, this is, say, fractally nested Russian dolls. So a kind of like slight adaptation. If I take that doll there, I kind of zoom it out, and then I take that doll down and zoom it out. I can do it with all the dolls. I can do it to infinity. So this idea basically that these nested dolls nested Russian dolls are fractal. And just to reinforce the point some more, here's some mathematical fractals. So that's a three-sided triangle made fractal. There's a dodecahedron made fractal. So you can see that the small parts reflect the whole. And there's another fractal called Romanesque broccoli or Romanesque cauliflower. See, the small parts reflect the whole fractal objects. Now, so we're going to show that the brain is fractal. So behind the complexity is actually this stunning simplicity. Now, talk about the brain, we can't really avoid going into brain science. We're going to do like a survey of cutting-edge brain science in quite a short space to give you a complete overview of the entire brain now. And then we're going to reduce this overview to this complete fractal conception. So, okay, overview of the entire brain. That's what we kind of normally get in textbooks. There's your brain, there's a sideways view. Now, if you kind of split it down the middle, that's another view where you're kind of looking from the kind of split down the middle from the inside out. And you can see it's a very crinkly surface. It's called cortex. It means bark, and it looks all raggedy and jaggedy and kind of crinkly. Now, in fact, that crinkly surface is actually a flat sheet. If you scrape out all the white matter, scrape out all the wiring, then the brain is actually a flat sheet. Now, it's drawn to scale. So if you imagine that's the side of your head. If that's your head, you have this huge kind of huge handkerchief, paper napkin, kind of compressed into your brain, but it's actually flat, maybe slightly concave. So you've got this huge kind of surface folded into your brain, hence all the kind of curves and the gyruses of the previous diagram. Now that's a monkey. That's a monkey brain. Now this flat sheet is actually parcellated into like a patchwork quilt. It's parcellated into roughly 50 areas that were named about 100 years ago. There's a human brain with the same numbers parceled out. So every parcellation in a human brain, you get in a monkey brain as well, correspondence. Now, since 100 years ago, these 50 divisions have been further subdivided into 500 divisions. So imagine your brain is like a patchwork quilt of these kind of separate functional areas, and they look slightly different. And so you've got this flat sheet made up of these separate functional areas, and different areas will do different things. So that will deal with vision. All that's to do with vision. That deals with touch. That deals with movement, and that deals with higher thoughts. And a remarkable thing is that this flat sheet is completely made up of what's called cortical columns, about 0.3 millimeters in diameter, a column. Each column contains about 1,000 neurons, roughly. The amazing thing is, cortical columns are also found in a mouse brain. And in a mouse brain, they're also the same diameter, have roughly the same organization, same number of neurons. So you have this basic building block, which is found in mouse brains, and this building block's been preserved into human brains, multiplied many, many times. So a mouse brain is a tiny sliver, but your human cortex is this huge kind of sheet, but it's actually made up of the same basic building block. That's amazing, isn't it? And it's the same building block as a mouse brain. So these cortical columns, this kind of building block of the brain, has a very stereotypical architecture, which is the same for a mouse brain. And it has, and say these are 3 views of a cortical column. It's basically divided into 6 layers, okay, 6 kind of stereotypical layers. Now, different parts of the brain will have variations in the layers. So that's motor cortex, which has slightly thicker cells in layer 5. And primary visual cortex is slightly more granular cells in layer 4. So regional variations, but it's taking the same basic design, you're kind of tweaking it to make variations in different parts of the brain. And these are some of the neurons in a column. So imagine the pyramidal cells, which is about 80% of all the neurons in the brain in a cortical column, the main workhorse of the brain. Imagine, say, 800 of those and then 200 of these types. And you kind of compress it into like a roll-up. And that's a cortical column. Okay, and that's your basic architecture building block of the brain. And your cerebral cortex and white matter consists of about 80% of your entire brain mass. So that's where most of the action is going on. Now, these patches are special because they're topographic, which means they represent things topographically in pictorial form. So in this brain scan, that's the back of a human head looking at a picture projecting to the back of the visual cortex. Now, topographic means that the flat sheet of your brain, where it represents points of light on your retina, then a point of light adjacent on your retina will be adjacent on the primary visual cortex. So it's like if you have a picture of light in your retina, that picture gets projected onto the back of your visual cortex. And the same with touch, and the same with all other modalities. And this is the point where I kind of alienate probably most of my audience here. But in one experiment, monkeys made to look at this thing, and radioactive traces put in, and then monkeys sacrificed, and that's basically the pattern in its visual cortex. Okay, moving quickly on. So kind of basically the picture is a picture. Okay, it's a picture in the retina which is projected to the visual cortex, and it's very, very precise and topographic. And the same And same for hearing as well. You have, instead of topographic, you have tonotopic. So your ear does a kind of frequency analysis. Like in your hi-fi, you have frequency analysis, which means the sound is turned into something visual. So the bass notes to the left and the high notes to the right, and you play a song, and then the kind of graphic equalizer goes up and down. But your ear does that. So it kind of it makes a picture out of sound, and that picture is projected to your primary auditory cortex, and so on. So also with touch, somatosensory cortex, kind of on the side of your brain. So if you imagine, you see that's the lip area, the face area, kind of the homunculus is drawn to correspond with the parts of touch in your somatosensory cortex. And again, touch topic, so touch 2 different points on your skin and 2 adjacent points on your somatotopic cortex. Now you see here that where the toes are, adjacent is the genitals. And that's the reason why, if you suck people's toes, it's like, well, it's erogenous, you see. Or there's the speaker putting in some gratuitous sex into his talk to try and perk up his audience. It's the oldest trick in the book, and it works. Okay. Okay, so yeah. So you get a picture, topographic, somatotopic, tonotopic, retinotopic. Okay. Something else I missed. In the visual cortex, you don't see bars of light. You don't see points of light. It separates the points into bars. So basically, you have bar detectors in your primary visual cortex. So see a bar in a certain orientation, a certain part of your visual cortex, then a certain column will light up. And then now you can see here, we have several columns in a kind of spin wheel formation, and each column represents a kind of orientation at a slightly different orientation. So you see these different bars of light at slightly different orientations, and it's color-coded. So basically, a hypercolumn is a collection of columns, and between the hypercolumn, a bar of light at any orientation is represented. So kind of columns are grouped together to make hypercolumns. And the thing about these hypercolumns, okay, this will come up later on, they compete against one another. So the winning column that sees a bar of light at a certain orientation will suppress its neighbors. Okay, we're going to come back to this because it's a fractal feature of the brain, this competition aspect, which is important. Now these patches of cortex, this patchwork quilt is connected in such a way in a hierarchy. So if, back to where we were, that's all to do with vision, that's your primary visual cortex, then all these patches to do with vision in the monkey brain, all parcellated, is arranged in a hierarchy. Can you see? So that's basically where your eyes go in, primary visual cortex, and it kind of, through many processing stations, it ends up in a part of the brain called a hippocampus. Just as you have a visual hierarchy, you also have a hierarchy for touch, and it ends up in the hippocampus. Now the hippocampus is this structure here, and all your sensory modalities converge to the hippocampus. And if you lose your hippocampus, you can't form new memories. In fact, if you lose a tiny sliver of neurons in a tiny region of the hippocampus called a CA1, you can't form new memories. Meet the same person again and again, never learn your way home, do the same crossword puzzle again and again. But it makes sense, doesn't it? If your sensory kind of apex, all of your senses funnel into this hippocampus and you lose it, then you can't kind of bind those sensory elements together, which are what memories are made of. So it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So in the same way, we have a kind of hierarchy for the sensory side, and that's actually a diagram of the hippocampus, all the inputs into the hippocampus. That's superior temporal gyrus to do with hearing, that's all to do with vision, that's to do with touch. And in the same way, we have a hierarchy for sensing. We also have a hierarchy for doing. So all the things we do start from the top of this hierarchy, but here it's called the cingulate cortex. So we start from the top of this hierarchy of doing, and then you have kind of like another hierarchy, all the things we can do. So, I mean, if, say, visual spatial processing and memory access, if I asked you to visualize yourself walking down the street where you live, then you're doing something, aren't you? It's internal, but you're doing something. If I asked you what's your birthday, then you do something internally. And obviously, if I asked you to move your arms and legs about, that's doing something. And also, if I asked you to think of something, do some calculation, that's doing something. And that's the cognitive division. So you see, these are all kind of modes of doing: memory access, visual spatial processing, etc., etc. So that's the kind of apex of your doing hierarchy. That's just another from experimental data, kind of from scans where people made to think things. So that's the cognitive division. That's how they learn about these things from brain scans, but also through anatomy. Now, some of these separate doing hierarchies are found in the front of your brain, where most of the sensory hierarchies are in the back part. Now, this hierarchy here is to do with speech. So the lower down, that's the motor cortex that moves your mouth. Then higher up are the representations of speech sounds. Then higher up is the representation of words, saying words. Then higher up sentences and syntax, and higher up meaning. So, and then the hierarchy here is to do with object recognition and processing, and also visual spatial manipulation. So when we kind of manipulate things in our minds, kind of move them about in our heads, kind of shuffle things around in our minds, and that's the part of the brain we're using. Now, another very important hierarchy is to do with people, and it's our social brain. Now, again, if I kind of slice your brain down the middle and look on the sideways bit, okay, that's the cingulate cortex. But here, in the medial prefrontal cortex, we have in these brain scans, if you ask to think about social things, if you ask to think about people and yourself in relation to other people, then that's the part of the brain that lights up. Now, this is also the part of the brain called the default mode network. It means that in brain scanning experiments, if you don't do anything, you're not given a specific task, then you go into a default mode, which means essentially like you daydream. So it's official now. Neuroscience says you daydream. Mm-hmm. And what do you daydream about? You daydream about social things, don't you? You daydream about people and yourself in relation to other. You daydream about, how can I become famous? How can I get promoted? How can I become loved? Does that ring true? How can I, you think about social things, you think, and you plot and scheme, you think, how can I get into that person's underwear? How can I, undermine my enemy? Because I don't think about those sorts of things. I'm just kind of speculating what other people might think about. But you get the picture. You think social things. That's daydreaming, isn't it? It's basically the default mode network, and that's your social brain, your social hierarchy, in other words. So all these hierarchies of doing and all these hierarchies of sensing. This is a diagram of kind of the cognitive hierarchy. Now, these two hierarchies, on the left side is your sensory hierarchy, and that's your motor hierarchy. Now, they're interconnected. So the back part of your brain to do with sensing and the front part to do with doing are interconnected. They're interconnected in such a way that the same levels of the hierarchy are interconnected with the corresponding level on the other side. So as you go up the hierarchy, the same levels tend to talk to one another, much like people, much like society. It doesn't always have to be like that. But anyway, so you have this kind of like hierarchy, and the two levels tend to talk to one another, and the hierarchy extends even up to the hippocampus and the kind of microstructures of the hippocampus. And it's very precise, and it's very ordered. Now, a concept I want to introduce is top-down and bottom-up. Now, bottom-up means that the sensory primitives, or the motor primitives, i.e., kind of automic movements, that's the bottom, and bar detectors and points of light, that's the bottom of your sensory hierarchy. Now, as you go bottom up, the representations become more and more abstract. So you bind together line detectors into kind of features, into objects, into more complex objects. So as you go up the hierarchy, as you go bottom up, then it becomes more complex. Simple movements get chained together to make more complex movements into whole behaviors, and the whole kind of behaviors expressed over many days or even over a lifetime. So that's the meaning of bottom up and top down. Now, the ways the motor and sensor hierarchies interconnect with one another is very precise. Now, I talked about the 6 layers early on. Now, this is a very interesting point from recent research, is that as we go bottom up in either the sensory hierarchy or the motor hierarchy, there's a very stereotypical pattern of projection. As we go bottom up, inputs tend to go into layer 4, go into layer 4, then go up to layers 1 and 2, and then it projects from layer 2 to 3 back to layer 4 again, up and then down again. So that's the bottom-up projection of projecting between layers in the hierarchy. And as you go top down, it's the opposite. You have a complementary pattern. You have projections from layer 5 go to layer 1, and then it trickles down to layer 5 again, and then it goes to layer 1. Well, to cut a long story short, it's very precisely wired. As you go up the hierarchy, it's where the layers project is very, very precisely ordered. So this is a wiring diagram from a monkey brain of actually specific fiber bundles projecting the back part and the front part, and these projections obey this hierarchy pattern and also this laminar projection pattern. Now here's actually a brain scan of actual fiber tracts in the human brain. So actual fiber tracts linking up the back part and the front part. Now this is a very recent brain scan from the kind of latest cutting edge scanner. It gets more high resolution, you see, as the computers and the powers of the scanners get more powerful. Now an amazing, staggering result came out in just, I mean, neuroscience is so cutting edge and it's news. All the results are pouring in now. And it was published in Science magazine, probably one of the most prestigious science magazines in the world, on 30th of March this year. And what they found was that the wiring of the cerebral cortex, okay, this is a staggering result, fundamental result about the wiring of the cerebral cortex. Now, the fiber bundles connecting front and back, left and right, but also all different patches. Now, the wiring, okay, it's completely grid-like. Actual brand, the fibers always intersect at right angles, which means it's like an American city, it's gritty. So even though I have all these patchwork quilt arrangement of all these centers and areas, how it's connected ultimately underneath, it's like American grid pattern. The wires go, you know, longitudinally across, but they never go diagonal. It's staggering, isn't it? And that's only just been discovered. Fundamental result about how the brain's wired. I'm going to show you later on in the talk explanation for this wiring pattern that comes out of the fractal brain theory. An auxiliary structure of the brain is called a striatum, and it's absolutely vital. Now, your frontal cortex, your doing part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't work unless it works for the striatum. So the striatum is this structure here in green, and it's basically essential for all the things you do, everything you think needs the striatum to work, and the front part of your brain, all that prefrontal cortex, works in conjunction with the striatum. Now, in this patchwork quilt arrangement, I mean, imagine these are subdivided into 10 kind of subdivisions. Each of those subdivisions has its own little patch of striatum, and it forms a loop with that little patch. So if that's a striatum, that's the cerebral cortex, and each of these patches has its own little loop to work with. So here is the actual striatum, putamen caudate nucleus. So you can match up the numbers. Say 32 is there, and 32 is over here, see? 46. And you can match up all the numbers. It's over here somewhere, 46. And each subdivision correspondingly has its own little patch of striatum to work with. It's fascinating, isn't it? Now, okay, that's a more complex diagram of the striatum. It's more complexity. It's not just a simple loop, because it's a fundamental structure of your brain, and every thought, every action you do uses a striatum. Now, it's interesting to go into a little complexity. There's actually 3 parallel paths, and one loops back. One's called the indirect, one's called the direct, one's called the hyperdirect. And without drowning in detail, what it means is that the striatum works in such a way, in the same way that when you hit a guitar note, you don't just hit the note. What you do is you have to damp the note first, so there's nothing playing before you hit the note. Then you hit the note, and then you stop the note. So you do 3 things. So as an analogy, what these 3 parallel circuits is doing is basically it's kind of damping down, clamping all the activity, then it's firing the signal, then it's shutting off again. And that's why we have very precise signals, very precise behaviors, and very precise kind of control of our arms and legs. So that's quite, more complexity behind the striatum. Now, here we go back to our kind of cortical hierarchy. Now here we have the kind of motor hierarchy. That's your primary motor cortex. That goes to your muscles and effectors. That's your secondary secondary motor area. That's the tertiary motor area. Okay, in this diagram. Now here we have in a diagram the kind of each patch has its own little striatal loop. Can you see? And then in grey we have that very precise pattern of wiring between the different layers. So it's kind of composite diagram. Now, each of these striatal areas works in conjunction with a chemical called dopamine. Each patch of striatum has its own little dopamine loop. And if the dopamine flows, then the striatum works and your thoughts flow. And if the dopamine doesn't flow, then your thoughts don't flow and you don't move. So Parkinson's disease, you lose all these neurons in an area called the substantia nigra pars compacta, and you can't move. There's the famous story of the frozen addicts who were using a synthetic heroin called MPTP, had an amazing high, but the next day they woke up with complete Parkinson's disease. It ended up basically frozen for the rest of their lives. Sad, isn't it? I mean, really is. But that's what the MPTP destroyed, these dopamine neurons. And also, if you take stimulants like amphetamine, basically what it does is it boosts the dopamine, and basically your wheels turn much faster. Stimulants. Does that ring true of your experience? Cocaine, Coca-Cola, sunshine, boosts dopamine. So, I mean, so it's very precise. It's like a machine. Dopamine flows, the wheels turn, your thoughts turn, your actions move, animate. Now, here's higher up the hierarchy, anterior cingulate cortex. These are kind of areas to do with thinking, and that links up to the motor hierarchy, but that's the kind of like cognitive areas of your brain. Also have, like in the other diagram, their own patch of striatum. And because the thinking part links into the moving part, not always, we sometimes think about moving and we sometimes move without thinking, but we can concatenate the two hierarchies into one great big hierarchy. Can you see? So there's one hierarchy of thinking linking up with the hierarchy of doing into your motor effectors. Now, you have this kind of amazing dopamine cascade, but up here we have the most famous dopamine pathway. In fact, this dopamine pathway is so famous it's been on the cover of Time magazine. What's he talking about? Because this dopamine pathway is the pathway of addiction. It's called a mesolimbic dopamine system. And so every single addictive drug, without exception, activates this pathway. Now, I'll linger on this point a little bit because people are very interested in addictive drugs, aren't they? Especially if you're addicted. But it's fascinating. I mean, if you smoke a cigarette, then basically the nicotine activates the cells in the ventral tegmental area. That's the official name of this part of the striatum. And then so dopamine flows. Cocaine works by inhibiting reuptake of dopamine at the presynapse. And amphetamine does what cocaine does, but also causes dopamine to leak out. So it has a twinfold effect. And ecstasy, there's a serotonin pathway going into the ventral tegmental area. Ecstasy causes serotonin to leak out, and then it causes a massive rush of dopamine into your brain. So all these, without exception, all these addictive drugs activate the dopamine pathway. Alcohol is funny because alcohol is inhibitory as a chemical, but what happens is that normally there's an inhibitory circuit which clamps down the VTA dopamine neurons, but then alcohol inhibits that inhibition. So, pathway of addiction of ventral tegmental area goes to the nucleus accumbens and trickle down like a cascade. What we have is kind of dopamine flows, these higher wheels turn, which then make the lower wheels turn, and it's kind of cascade of dopamine. Dopamine cascades down, cascades down. So it's almost like a machine, isn't it? It's almost like a real kind of like device. That kind of the cog wheels turning above causes the cog wheels below to turn, and your arms and legs move. Isn't that fascinating, isn't it? And now the question is, if addictive drugs activate your mesolimbic dopamine system, then what naturally activates your pathway of addiction? So that's the question mark. Well, the answer is your emotion centers, surely. If addictive drugs normally make you addicted and do things you wouldn't normally do, then basically your emotions are your natural drive, aren't they? So we're going to now talk about the emotion centers. This is where it gets interesting, that drive all our behavior. Now the emotion centers are three-tiered. And these three tiers reflect, one, evolution. You get evolutionarily old, but also as we go up complexity, we get more sophisticated emotions and fears and desires, and also more sophistication. So hypothalamus is something you learn about in school. It's the most one of the most important parts of your brain. Amygdala, you read about sometimes, but the ventral and medial prefrontal cortex is something that's less familiar. Now, these things deal with fear and desire in the most, everything you do naturally is driven by these emotion centers. And it's interesting to go into this a little in depth. Now, the hypothalamus is that basically. It's a tiny sliver of neurons in your brain. And it basically deals with things like hunger, thirst, and warmth, and things like, homeostasis in the most basic way. It deals with hunger by literally detecting glucose in your blood. So low glucose means you're hungry. It deals with thirst by actually detecting the osmotic balance between membranes. It actually measures the amount of water in your blood, and it actually measures the temperature of your blood. So basically, these are your basic drives. If you don't satisfy these drives, then you die. So your hypothalamus is the kind of foundation of all your fears and desires. If you don't do what the hypothalamus says, you don't exist. Now, the amygdala is slightly more complex, and evolutionarily kind of more recent. Now, that's the amygdala in front of your hippocampus. Now it gets more complex because the amygdala deals with things like, what hypothalamus does deal with sexual drive and orgasm, but the amygdala deals with things like sexual orientation and sexual preference, and also gender orientation, and also maternal behavior. And also in mice and rats, all sexual behavior is driven by pheromones. It's all driven by smell. That's why rats and mice in pitch black can breed like mice and rats, because they don't have to see. It's all driven by smell. So as you go further up, it gets even more complex. Also, the amygdala deals with fear, maternal behavior, and also conditioning as well. Learned associations, conditioned place preference, contextual fear aversion, conditioning. If you lose your amygdala, then you lose your sense of fear. So amazing. But it sounds great until you realize that if you lose your sense of fear, then you're going to start walking into cars and stuff. As we go further up the hierarchy, now amygdala to ventral and medial prefrontal cortex, it gets more sophisticated. Now ventral and medial prefrontal cortex, or ventral or orbital frontal cortex, is kind of like looking underneath, above your eye sockets, and it's part of your brain looking beneath up. And you split down the middle again, this kind of section here, especially around here, and this region here underneath your brain is heavily involved with emotional processing. Now here, your desires and fears get more complex now because, I mean, this is a monkey brain, and different areas deal with vision, touch, and taste. Now, the sensation of fat in your mouth, that kind of ice cream, my daughter loves ice cream, it's hardwired. Buttered bread versus non-buttered bread, that kind of slippery sensation in your mouth, kind of oily, wet olive oil pizza, you're actually hardwired to gain pleasure from that. That's why little kids just love ice cream. And it makes sense. In ancient times, fat was really, really a high reward thing. Now it's kind of something people obsess to get rid of. But in some cultures, I mean, the famous joke in Chinese culture is actually, if you're fat, I mean, attitudes are changing. Fat means good, okay? The classic gaucherie of someone from mainland China. It doesn't happen so often now because it's more integrated now. I mean, a man comes over to the West and in a party, dinner party, says to a woman, he just introduced you, you're fat. Meaning it's a compliment, So fat is actually, you're hardwired to like fat, and it makes sense, doesn't it? And also, moving on from fat, vision, monkeys are hardwired to appreciate ripe fruit as opposed to non-ripe fruit. And that's, basically it's biologically advantageous to eat ripe fruit. And also things like touch. This is where a higher pleasure of, stroking rabbits or stroking fat. These pleasures also are. This guy's, I know what you're thinking, this guy's fat obsessed. Fat. It's always, he's got fat in his mind. Okay, so fat and stroking, soft things and these higher kind of sensations are kind of slightly above what the amygdala can handle. And also what the hypothalamus can handle. Also, incidentally, the hypothalamus also can detect fatty acids in your blood, and that's rewarding. So now as we go further up, we have a kind of, in a human brain, as you go further more to the tip of the brain, it's more complex than the monkey brain. In the orbital frontal cortex, the desires and the kind of like associations become more and more abstract. As we go from the back to the front, things like money, things like people, like social assessments. Say sexual assessment. You have kind of orgasm. You have things like pheromone processing, but then you have even more advanced things like men are hardwired to appreciate the 0.7 ratio. That's we don't know exactly how it works, but for some reason 0.7 hip ratio. We're hardwired to like it. And also soft, shiny skin means high estrogen and shiny hair, and this is something we're hardwired to detect. And also women, square shoulders and kind of a square jawline is basically something that's hardwired. It triggers certain, feelings. So this is kind of more complex. And even more complex than that is kind of social things. Foucault, the philosopher, said that hell is other people, but so is heaven. So as we go further up, things like empathy and morality are processed right at the tip of the brain. And also things like, back to sex, status, something like status that the amygdala cannot handle. Because this idea that women have to really assess men, because it takes a man 5 minutes to propagate his genes in the next round of life. where a woman is lumbered for at least 9 months, and then for years, as you know, anyone with a family knows. So a man sees, you know, high estrogen, curves, shiny skin, shiny hair, and, you know, bing, 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 you know, go for it. Whereas a woman really has to assess, but that means wit, humour, status. What's this man, you know, she looks fit, but what's behind this man? And it has to make a really amazingly careful assessment of it. And so this is something that this part of the brain would deal with, status, something far beyond what the amygdala or hypothalamus can do. Now, as you get right to the tip of the brain, then we're dealing with moral things and kind of really the highest kind of social things. Empathy, etc., altruism, guilt, compassion. But also this part of the brain is very easily damaged in car accidents because it's at the front of the brain. If you get a car accident, you kind of go forwards and your brain hits the bone above the orbits of your eyes. In one controversial study, they found that incarcerated psychopaths who really did kill lots of people and did horrible things to them and stuff, they found, very controversial study, they found that, okay, some of the psychopaths came from really bad homes, like, and I mean, I know this is, goes against some people's ideas of, oh, it's, you know, conditioning, etc. and stuff. I mean, but really, sometimes if you're like Hitler and your father, you know, beat the shit out of you and beat you into a coma several times, then that might induce psychopathy. So this kind of conditioning can produce, bad homes can produce bad behavior. I know it doesn't sit well with some people, but I think these are facts of life. Well, all these psychopaths who came from bad homes, you could kind of explain where the behavior came from. I mean, really bad, you know, like Fritzl, the guy who locked his daughter up, you know, his mother had beaten up in a concentration camp and stuff, you know, really severe stuff. But there was a subset of these psychopaths who came from perfect upbringings, perfect homes, and they became psychopaths. But then they found, without exception, these perfect upbringing kids all had some kind of abnormality in their orbital frontal cortex, and it's actually traced back to some kind of car accident or some kind of fall or some kind of trauma to the front of the head. Now, very controversial results, I know, very controversial, but it kind of fits in with our picture of a kind of gradient of desire and fear right up to the highest desires to do with people and society and morality. These are the engines of the mind. This is what drives us, and this is the substrate of the engines of the mind. Now the interesting thing, latest cutting-edge research has shown that these engines of the mind also have the same striatal structure as the rest of the prefrontal cortex. Now this is really was a controversial result for years and years and years, but it's only in recent maybe 5-10 years that's been widely accepted now. You won't find this in neuroscience textbooks yet, but it is basically accepted result that each of these areas have their own little bit of striatum. That is actually the anterior cingulate cortex. The higher part is connected to the nucleus accumbens and the pathway of addiction, but then also the amygdala has its own little striatal area and its own little dopamine loop as well. And right to the top, the hypothalamus has its own bit of striatum, lateral septum, and its own dopamine system. Now this is interesting because we're going to do something innovative now. I'm going to justify this innovation, and I'm going to show you why it fits into the wider scheme I'm going to show. What it means is that we can fit, okay, this is the emotion centers we've been talking about, the three-tiered emotion centers, and we've basically kind of made it into the same format as the rest of the prefrontal cortex. What it means is that we can now fit the emotion centers and the rest of the prefrontal cortex into one hierarchy. And I can justify it because I'm going to do something interesting later on with this hierarchy. We can justify it because the dopamine cascade pattern seems to fit with higher up the emotion centers, that indeed the emotion centers do kind of cascade dopamine down and within itself, but also the pattern of projection into the cortical areas fits that top-down pattern of projecting. And also because each of these emotion centers also has its own architecture of stratum and dopamine, then it makes perfect sense to fit it all into one hierarchy. And also research shows that indeed emotions, there's not a cutoff between cognition, doing and emotions, it's actually one continuum. Now, I'm going to fractalize the brain in a minute. I'll show you exactly why this innovation is actually so interesting and important later on. And it's because what we're going to do now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to completely Russian doll fractalize the brain. Okay, so again, preliminaries, we're going to fractalize the entire brain. So back to our Russian dolls. Okay, so we think that this is how the brain is organized. Okay, so it's basically a Russian doll fractal nested structure. Now, we saw those pyramidal neurons earlier on in a cortical column, and there's about 800 of those in a single column. Now, there's a stereotypical sequence which I'm going to show you, which is completely fractal. A pyramidal cell has dendrites feeding signals into it. So it's feeding into the cell body. And then an axon comes out from the cell body, and it goes to other areas, other pyramidal cells, and it branches out, branches out, branches out. So there's a process of feeding in and feeding out. But also there's a looping back. The signal would always loop back to the same vicinity as the original cell. Now, if you take a cortical column, different columns will project into that cortical column, and then the cortical column, entire collection of neurons, will project out to other cortical columns, and then the entire cortical column will loop back into itself. If we take a macro column, a hypercolumn, then again, same pattern of projecting out to neighboring hypercolumns, feeding in from neighboring hypercolumns, but also this kind of looping back. Now, if we take an entire sheet of cortex, we also have this kind of like flowing in from different patches of cortex, flowing out to other patches of cortex, but also looping back either through the microscopic kind of looping back from columns, or else the looping back from its own striatal loop. So here we have the same cortical patch, which is prefrontal cortex, and we have the same loop, but then projecting out and projecting in from other cortical patches, which also have that same fractal structure, feeding in, feeding out, looping back. Now, okay, we go to the entire brain now. Now we have this pattern where we have these kind of flowing into the hippocampus of all these separate sensory modalities, and the sensory modalities combine to make composite sensory modalities. Whereas now, each branch is not a single sliver of dendrite or nerve fiber, it's actually an entire modality of doing. So basically, if that's the hippocampus, then these are all the major inputs to the hippocampus, then each of these blocks is like one of these major branches flowing into the hippocampus. And correspondingly, when we get to the cingulate cortex, each of these boxes, each of these branches is not just a nerve fiber, it's actually an entire mode of doing. And each mode of doing will flow into submodes of doing in this kind of branching structure. And then also the entire cingulate cortex, the entire brain loops back on itself. So we see this wiring diagram of the hippocampal cortex, hippocampal complex. So this block here is basically cingulate cortex and retrosplenial cortex, which is basically that, retrosplenial cortex, and that's the rest of the cingulate cortex. So we see here, the looping back in this instance is not just a nerve fiber, but it's an entire thick bundle of hundreds of thousands of axons. But the main point is that this flowing in, flowing out, looping back is completely fractal. So each component here, each block also has the same structure of flowing into it, other blocks flow into it, flow out from it, and then loop back either through a striatal loop or not, through a more localized loop. Then each of these substructures has its own kind of flowing in, flowing out, made up of these hypercolumns with flowing out, flowing in, looping back, made of columns flowing out, flowing in, looping back, until neurons flowing in, completely fractal. Now, to further fractalize the brain, I'll show you why I did my little innovation earlier on, because we're going to basically completely concatenate this hierarchy into a single Russian doll structure. And the reason why I can do that is okay, a diagram sometimes is worth 1,000 words, and a single diagram will make my point. Now, even though this exists in a hierarchy, a kind of lateral hierarchy, it's actually Russian doll structure. I'll tell you why, because a single diagram, you know that on your computer you make directories and you make subdirectories. You make folders and you put things into folders. Now these directories can be written in two ways. In old-fashioned MS-DOS or Unix, you had to type out a long list of names. So each one of those words is a directory, and that's a subdirectory. So my documents, subdirectory my music, subdirectory of rock and pop, Elvis songs. So you see a hierarchy of directory structure. But you also know that this directory structure also has a kind of folder structure. So especially in Apple Macs, uses kind of like the folders also nested. What's represented as a long list of names is also logically virtually the same. It's basically topologically the same as a folder structure. So now I apply this long list structure to my earlier concatenation of the emotion centers with the cognitive hierarchy, with the motor hierarchy, you can see the same concept applies in that the same hierarchy can also be conceptualized equivalent to nested folders. So moving a muscle in my motor cortex that moves my mouth exists in the context of saying word sounds, exists in the context of saying words, exists in the context of saying sentences, exists in the context of meaning, exists in the context of the, what I want to do that meaning, what I want to convey, and the kind of final objective of what I'm trying to say. But you see, basically nesting, nesting, nesting. So therefore, the entire brain, the lateral hierarchies, concatenate into Russian doll structure. So therefore, the entire brain, i.e. all the hierarchies, concatenate into one big Russian doll. Does it make sense, doesn't it? It's a visual explanation of something very complex. Okay, what Michael Barnsley, the fractal mathematician, calls the mathematics of the eye. Not only is, just quickly go over, not only is brain structure fractal, Russian doll-like, but also brain process is also completely fractal. So the process of the brain is also completely fractal. I'll tell you why. Neurotransmitters compete to bind onto receptors, and synapses compete on a stretch of dendrite to make links with a neuron. Neurons compete with one another for nerve growth factor. Ones that win the competition survive, and the ones that lose this competition, they die. As we saw earlier, cortical columns compete against one another to represent bars of light, different orientations. And then you know that your perceptions compete for interpretation. Is that a kind of cloud, or is it a kind of Jesus in the sky? And you know that things compete for your attention. And you know that moods compete. Is a glass half full, is it half empty? And you know that when you make a decision, that's like a competition, isn't it? But surely that's completely fractal. And also, on a stretch of neuron, synapses link up on a stretch of dendrite. They link up. And then dendrites link up in a cell body. And then neurons link up through synapses. And then columns link up. And then patches of cortex link up in a hierarchy. But then you chain your thoughts together into succession of thoughts and stuff. And thoughts link up. So completely fractal. So the process of the brain, fractal, but the structure of the brain, fractal. And another other thing we do, obviously, on a kind of whole human level, we sense things and we do things. So this pattern we showed earlier of projecting in, projecting out, in a sense, is fractal doing and fractal sensing. So fractal sensing, fractal doing, fractal competing, fractal linking up. Not only is the structure of the brain fractal, but also the process of the brain is completely fractal as well. Now we're going to take this theory much, much further. It goes. These are preliminaries. You won't believe how deep this theory goes. Seriously, I mean, this is basically the base of the mountain. We're going to go much, 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 much higher. You don't believe how far this theory goes. Just to reinforce the point, I'll show an animation now. Now that's called a diffusion limited aggregate. Can you see it's actually a computer program? Now, can you see these little kind of specks? Okay, these are like little dots. They're jiggling around, random Brownian motion, jiggling about. Okay. Now these used to be called slow grows. What's happening is that you have a central point, starts from the center, and it kind of zooms out. Okay. Well, what's happening is these points are jiggling about, and when the point hits this kind of branching tree, it kind of sticks to it. Now, after it's stuck to it, it itself becomes sticky. So then when another point goes to it, it sticks to it as well. Now this is called diffusion limited aggregate. It used to be called a slow grow because you ran a computer overnight. And basically you might get half that fractal, okay? But now you run it for a few seconds, and basically computers about 10,000 times faster than they were in the 70s when these was discovered. Now what this is, diffusion limited aggregates are used in complexity theory to model things like snowflake growth and town growth. So a snowflake always grows from an impurity. If you don't have that impurity, then the snowflakes don't form. And also, when you freeze water, it starts from an impurity. You have this thing called supercooled water. If there's no impurities, you can have it minus 100 degrees, and the water doesn't freeze. It's supercooled. So snowflake formation and also freezing starts from an impurity, and it starts from that impurity, it grows outwards, the freezing spreads outwards. And towns, it starts from some shack, a trader's shack by a river. Then another settler moves and builds another shack next to it because people like to stay close and to share things and stuff and to collaborate. And then eventually a whole town grows. And this is used to model town growth. Now, we can also use this to model how we develop higher order conditioning from primary unconditioned rewards. So back to the emotion centers again. You're born with basic drives. You know nothing about the world. You have basic drives, the feeling of fat in your mouth, orgasm, nice sense of touch. But you kind of backward chain complexity back from that. So as a baby, you know very little of the world. But you kind of learn your mother's nipple. You learn a kind of sensation of food in your mouth. Then you kind of learn through association that food comes from a spoon, it comes from a little jar, it comes from a nipple, or it comes from the cupboard. And you chain these associations. And you go through life and you basically chain from basic primary rewards a whole constellation of beliefs around your basic desires and your basic fears. So what I'm saying is, diffusion limited aggregates are actually a model of how you form your knowledge webs. So each of these different colors might represent a basic drive. Blue might be sex, because you think a lot about sex and how to get it. And or that might be football in some people's brains, and that might be sex. So each of these might represent a different drive, and you grow back from those basic drives coded by your emotion centers, hypothalamus, amygdala, and orbital frontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex. You basically, from that, you grow out this knowledge web that fits into your kind of brain, your mind space. Now, the interesting thing is that, okay, everything I reason for this representation of my mind growing back from my emotion centers, this kind of a tree of knowledge growing in my mind space, representing my universe, my inner world of all the things I learn, all the things I like, all the things I fear, okay, is fractal with a neuron. So basically, these are neurons. Okay. The thing is, everything I reason about a neuron, I can also reason about my diffusion limited aggregate representation of my brain. So in the same way, behaviors are reinforced by my emotion centers at the center where it begins. And the orgasm sends a back spike of reward to reinforce all those behaviors that led to that orgasm. The needle in the arm, the kind of cigarette feels reward, feeling of satisfaction, rewards those behaviors that lead up to that satisfaction in a complex way. In the same way, a neuron will fire, and then a backspike is sent to all the synapses which made it fire, and then literally over many days, literally proteins are shuttled from the cell body back to these synapses to actually consolidate them. So in the same way, everything I reason for this kind of structure of my knowledge web, I can also completely reason for my for a neuron. So that's a fractal in a very abstract sense. But you can see the correspondence between something abstract, something existing in my mind space, and a neuron. So everything I reason for a neuron, I can also reason for my entire knowledge web. And that's another justification for why I actually earlier on, and also allows a kind of explanation, also a reason why it makes perfect sense to put the emotion centers and the rest of your prefrontal cortex and the rest of your brain into one hierarchy. Okay, so these are the kind of preliminaries. Really, this is the introduction. Really, there's so much more. I'm going to take a short break to make this brain theory into a proper scientific theory. So we need basically a language to capture our fractal decomposition of the brain in order to gain insight and understanding, and to also program it into a computer as well. Now, the language and the formalism which we'll use to completely represent this brain theory, to mathematize it, no equations apart from a very simple one coming up. Okay, is basically binary trees. Now, binary trees are the most basic and important data structure in all computer science. So if these are trees, that's a binary tree. Basically, it means all the branches are in two. So it doesn't branch in 3, it always branches in 2. So it's binary tree, and it's a fractal, you see. So each little binary branch is a fractal of the main tree. In fact, most trees are fractal. Now, binary trees can be used to represent things. So say that's a binary tree, 2 branches, and you can imagine that as a square, 2 squares. And I can rotate it, and that's also a binary tree, and that's like a little 2 by 2 square. Now, I can then, you can see that's also a binary tree, and I've got a kind of 4 by 4 grid, and that's also a big binary tree, and that's an even bigger binary tree. Now, each of these squares, I can either color black or white, 0 or 1. In the same way, when you take JPEGs with your camera, you've got a grid, and you're assigning a number. Well, you got 4 numbers. Well, 3 numbers. You got red, green, blue, and you got a number between 1 and 256, and you assign a number to those 3 numbers. And with a big enough array, you get a photograph, basically. So the same principle but just simplified. Make it black and white, but you can easily add color. Okay, these are flat grids which can represent things, kind of pictures, if you like. Now, these spatial flat grids can also represent time. So each one of these flat grids has now been chained in time, and this binary tree here is representing a sequence of flat grids. So like a flick cartoon, each of these flat grids can contain a picture, and then over time I can flick through the flick cartoon, and I can make a little animation or some little cartoon animating in time. And that's how movies work. That's how computer movies work, kind of a succession of frames. So with binary trees, I can represent space and time. Now, some of you might be thinking, binary trees, that's all very convenient for you, but what has that got to do with the brain? What's that got to do with psychology and the mind? Well, I'm going to show you in the next 10, 15 minutes absolutely everything. Okay, absolutely everything to do with how the brain works, psychology and neuroscience. Right? And I'll show you why. There's a condition called hemi-neglect. We lose a part of your brain. You literally lose half your world. You lose one side of your visual world. Now, this is a condition, if you damage your right parietal cortex, if a man is asked to visualize the street where he grew up, to walk down it, and is asked to name the buildings to his left or right, he can only name the buildings on one side. But then he's told to walk to the end of the street and turn around and visualize where he grew up, then he can name the buildings on the other side now. And if this person's asked to draw, it's not uncommon, so there's many case studies in the world. Asked to draw a clock, she or he can only place them on one side of the clock, draw a flower. And seeing a word, say on a menu, you can only see one side of the word, can't actually read it. And this is funny, and this actually happens. A place of food, if the person's asked to eat a place of food, what happens is that, place of food, the person starts eating, and then stops. And then if you turn the plate of food round, he starts eating again, and then he stops. So it actually happens. So he's kind of lost half his world. Fascinating, isn't it? Binary subdivisioning of the world, and so on, etc. Also, brain waves also are in powers of 2. Now, this is exactly the same diagram as before, but we're not talking about spatial frequency waves. We're talking about brain waves. The famous alpha wave, 10 hertz. Also theta waves, 5 hertz, beta waves, 20, 40. Now, when they gave these waves names, they weren't thinking in powers of 2. This is just where the wave's energy is concentrated. This just happened to kind of be found at these frequencies. But we have this definite doubling pattern of 5 doubled to 10, doubled to 20, doubled to 40. And again, in music, that's how notes are kind of, halved and halved to make notes. But what's interesting is how we use those notes. How we represent music, pop music, folk music, nursery rhymes, but also all common time classical music has a certain meter, 4 beats to a measure, and then those 4 beats are grouped in 8, then those 8s are grouped in 16, then those 16s are grouped in 32, and then 32 blocks will then be grouped in 64 powers of 2. And if you don't group it in these kind of powers of 2, it sounds peculiar, kind of a suspended effect. So for some reason, powers of 2, kind of 2, 4, 8, 16, somehow it makes it easier for us to process music, common time classical music, folk music, pop music, nursery rhymes. There's something about powers of 2 in how we represent musical beats and poetry and stuff. But also language. Noam Chomsky decompose all languages in the world in a binary structure. So a very simple sentence, a noun phrase, word phrase, that's a binary tree. Brains think, simple sentence, a binary tree. Now, this more complex sentence, brains think binary. We have a binary branching here and another binary branching. Now this simple binary tree can itself be contained in another bigger binary tree. Way thinks, brains think binary, and that's a binary tree. Now all sentences can be decomposed in this way into binary structures, binary tree structures. Now, so we covered vision, we covered music and speech. Now we can generalize this to everything else, and the reason why is because in the first part of the talk we showed how the entire brain in the cortex has a common underlying architecture, and also because we are proposing that the brain is a fractal, self-similar, symmetrical structure, and we've gone a long way to show that that is the case. Then we can extrapolate from speech, music, and vision to everything else, and it makes perfect sense, and we should do. Okay. Now the real clincher, if you're not already convinced, is about how brains come into being. Because brains come into being in the same way all the cells in your body come into being, and that's through cell division, and that's also a binary branching process. So this is how you start life. You start, fertilized egg becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16, becomes 32, 64, doubling, 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 and eventually after a few weeks you become that. So that's how you start off life. You become a flat disk. But that's a big step up from a fertilized egg, okay, so you've gotten somewhere already. And then that flat disk, a part of it will differentiate into the brain now. So that's how you start life. That's going to become the brain region. And so that brain region folds up into a tube. So that becomes your like kind of primitive brain. Now already, by 4 to 6 weeks, your cells in this tube are already kind of earmarked to become certain parts of your brain. Isn't that amazing? 4 to 5 week embryo. Already kind of like the cells are dividing in such a way that there's always billions of cells already are going to become different parts of your brain. Now, this idea here is a flat map. What it means is that if the cells keep dividing, but they don't curl up and assume complex 3D structure. If the cells stayed flat through the cell divisioning process, then they make what's called a flat map, a cell flat map. So that's a hypothalamus from earlier on with complex 3D structure, and that's a flat map of the hypothalamus. It's basically flattened out, and that's a flat map of the cerebral cortex. Okay, so you see how cells divide in a binary way. And we're representing that cell division in terms of flat maps. Now, there's a question of how do different regions of the brain and different regions of your body know what to be? There's such complexity. I mean, there's such a large number of areas here and a large number of areas of the cortex. They have to decide, know what to be, but also have to precisely know how to wire up with one another. So the regions have to be, you have to specify regions. But how do you specify the regions? Now, there's two ways. The two ways are extrinsic and intrinsic. A cell knows what to be, a neuron knows what to be, in the same way that you become who you are, intrinsic and extrinsic, which means your genes, intrinsic from your lineage, and extrinsic from your conditioning, the people, your upbringing. In the same way, all the cells in your body know what to be through their lineage, where they came from, but also through their chemical environment. Now, it's very hard to basically specify the complexity of the brain in terms of chemical environment, because then the question becomes, how do you create the boundaries to separate the chemical environments, to stop the chemicals from diffusing to other parts of the brain? But there's a far easier way of specifying the regions, and that's through lineage. So basically you specify these different regions through lineage, through the cells, from where the cells come from. Now, a computer program which illustrates this idea of lineage, I'll show you. Basically, a computer program I wrote. Just close this one down and make it faster, this other program. Now, now, can you see that is a binary tree? So if that's the central branch, for that central branch it divides into 2, then recursively it divides into 2 again, and divides into 2 again. So it's drawn in such a way that it's fractal and that fits on flat onto the screen. But the main thing is that is a binary tree. Now, how this program works is it's basically, it marks out lineage. So basically, if I click on any node, any kind of node on this binary tree, then every node below it gets marked slightly darker. So look, if I click on here, look, if I click on here, then everything below it has been marked slightly darker blue. And likewise, if I go down to one of its daughter nodes here, and I click it, it's marked darker blue again. I can randomly click, and I can basically, tiny little node here, I can mark darker blue, etc. Now this is the mother node, isn't it? This is this one here, can you see, at the center? If I click on that, the entire, all its progeny, its daughter nodes, become marked in blue. So you see what's happening? I'm using it to basically mark out different regions on this binary grid that represents a binary tree. Now, so you know, here's one I made earlier, echoing that famous Blue Peter line. Here's one I made earlier, look. That's the same diagram, but in JPEG. So here's one I made earlier. Okay. So see, the same principle I used to make, you know, I just showed you. I can draw any arbitrary picture by clicking on that screen of that program. Now here's another one I made earlier, but it's symmetrical down the center. Okay. Now to illustrate a point. Now here is the flat map that I've drawn using my lineage program, and here's the flat map of the brain. What I'm saying is, in the same way, lineage can be used to mark out all these different brain regions in the hypothalamus. That's the flat map of the hypothalamus, and that's the flat map of the cerebral cortex in all these different areas. I can use my lineage program to mark out corresponding areas in this flat map of the brain, in this digitized flat map of the brain. So what I'm saying is, the same process of lineage that theoretically and most sensibly gives rise to real brains and real brain regions, I can also use that same process to create a digitized brain of corresponding brain regions, and we're using the same lineage kind of process to do it. Now, because it's fractal, once I have this kind of way of doing things, then basically I can digitize the entire brain. I can basically create all the brain centers and all the subcenters of the brain in a fractal way. But once I have it in this kind of digital format, I can then, with binary trees, I can digitize the entire brain. But also, once I have it in this kind of gritty format, I can also wire up different regions. And because the binary cell lineage gives me a way of specifying regions, it also gives me a code for giving these different regions addresses. So then I can make the wires go to different regions and address like sending letters. But the way it works is that there's an addressing scheme which only allows the fibers to go up and across. That's super efficient because of binary coding. But this is exactly what they found in the recent paper. The fibers only go in this gritty pattern. That's exactly what I need for my brain theory to connect up my digitized brain. So I'm saying if the digitized brain actually comes about through the same way that real brains come about, then this gritty wiring scheme is actually what they found in real brains. Now, once I have it in this kind of gritty format, now suppose, okay, that's the kind of my digitized brain, which goes off to billions and billions of neurons. Now, with this binary language, if I want to link up to, this might correspond to my digitized brain. And this is two major regions of the brain. Now, if I want to make connections to that region, then I can't go straight across. What I need to do is I need to do a tree walk. I need to go up, 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 down, 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 up. And it's fractal, so basically these are subregions of my digitized brain. If I want to go from there to there, I can't just go straight across. I need to go up, 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 up. You get the picture? Now it sounds like absolute palaver. Why can't I just go across? But you realise that in the same way that we have letters, we have basically towns, we have countries, counties, streets. You get the picture, and then we have a door number. It'd be a terrific hassle if there's basically one street and one, or one number to represent every house in the world. So this hierarchical scheme is actually a really efficient way of addressing messages across our digitized brain and across real brains as well. And okay, it's fractal, so it goes on and on to all the neurons in your brain. Now, this digitized scheme also allows me to digitize our topographic maps. So we have those tonotopic maps, topographic maps, and somatotopic maps. Now, with this digitized scheme, I can also digitize all these pictures that are projected into my cortex. And those pictures, those representations, those bars of light, at different orientations, I can also digitize as well. So it's basically a way of taking real, and bars of light can represent like a simple picture, like basically just to show you a kind of principle. And these simple pictures can be animated in time. It's just where basically representing everything the brain can represent, but in a digitized way. But also the processes of the brain I talked about, linking up, competing, sensing and doing. I can also express those processes in my digital language. What we're heading towards now really is a way of programming the brain theory into a computer. Now I know some of you are going to be really in a state of shock because it sounds really reductionist. And what about the soul? What about the sacred and stuff? We're going to go to that at the end. So I mean, have no fears. We're going to basically restore the soul. So I'm not going to totally reduce consciousness to nothing. Basically, I'm going to go into the consciousness thing in a minute. So don't go away. I mean, somebody will walk out at this point and go, oh God, damn reductionist, it's going to reduce my brain to the computer. Okay, nothing of the sort. Okay, look. So process of the brain, structure of the brain completely digitized in this language. Now, we need to represent time now. So we have a static digitized brain, but now we need to introduce time. We showed these brain waves earlier on. In the same way that the brain is digitized into kind of digital quantized compartments, time is also digitized. And we know this because of brain waves and because of the fact that, say for instance, a theta wave in your hippocampus. Now rabbits also have theta waves, and rabbits sniff. They actually sniff at 5-6 hertz a second, and the sniffing is actually in phase with the theta wave of their hippocampus. And basically coincides. Now, if you put the signal at the trough of the theta wave of the rabbit, the smell signal, then the rabbit never learns to smell. It doesn't register it. And also gamma waves, how your visual cortex works. Now gamma waves are very special because your entire brain is predisposed to oscillate at 40 hertz. Your entire brain, all of it. And there's a reason for that, because the most common inhibitory receptor called the, it's like comical, gamma aminobutyric acid A receptor subtype. So there's one for Hangman. Well, anyway, that's 40 hertz, and basically this receptor subtype has a kind of a resting period of 25 milliseconds. It does its thing, it inhibits. Okay, but it has to rest for 25 milliseconds. Then it can inhibit again, because there's 25 milliseconds in a second. Therefore, it works at 40 hertz. So your entire brain kind of if it went synchronized, it will work at 40 hertz. And superimposed on the 40 hertz component is your 20 hertz alpha wave and theta wave component. Now alpha waves, many people used to think that alpha waves were your resting state. Basically, when you're relaxed, then basically alpha waves come out. We know now, research in the past 10 years, that alpha waves are used to synchronize the front and the back part of your brain. And then synchronization of more local areas is beta waves, and actual synchronization of even smaller areas is gamma waves. So it's a real kind of and the main point is that basically time is discretized, it's sliced into intervals in the same way that the structure is also kind of sliced up and quantized. Now, how do we represent time? Okay, so this, I've shortened this explanation because I kind of got convoluted last time in the past talks. Basically, it's to do with those loops everywhere. In those loops we found all over the brain, the striatal loops, the looping that we found throughout the structure of the brain, looping back. Now, if this looping back is found all over the brain, it must be doing something fundamental. And I'm saying what the fundamental thing it's doing is representing time. And it's going to seem obvious once I explain it, because when we loop something back, if time is sliced in these kind of packets of quantized packets, now at a certain time, if I represent something and I send a signal out, if I loop it back, by the time that thing gets back, it's the next time interval. So therefore, when the next time interval t+1 happens, what I'm sensing is what happened in t-1. So basically, I'm actually being able to sample 2 points in time. So what I'm doing is basically I'm binary representing 2 points in time, neighboring points. But then I can take that same process recursively, then I can represent 3 points in time, basically adding to that binary tree. If I can recognize 2 points in time, I can also reconstruct 2 points in time, and 3 points in time, and 4 points in time. To cut a long story short, what it means, these loops allow me to represent sequences, allow me to recognize sequences, but also allow me to reconstruct sequences. And that's what all behavior is. And that's why these striatal loops are found throughout your prefrontal cortex. And we know that the striatum is to do with sequencing thoughts and behaviors, and also rewarding those thoughts and behaviors with dopamine and making them turn of dopamine. So there you have it, the representing of time, quantized time in gamma waves, beta waves, alpha waves, and theta waves. And even lower waves, less than 5-6 hertz delta waves, which could be a second, and even waves lower than that. We know your lives are sequenced in terms of hours and minutes, in terms of days. Okay, not by brain waves, but fractal time. Okay. Anyway, so what we've done is basically we've digitized the brain. So we've digitized the brain. We have this explanation for this kind of griddy wiring scheme, which has just been latest research in neuroscience. We also have a way of introducing time, fractal time, to our digitized brain. So fractal time, fractal brain. With this language of digitized space and time, we can represent any thought, any action, any kind of thing we can represent in our real brains. We can also map to our digitized brain. Now, I know this is almost sounding like artificial intelligence now. Now, I know this is a simplification of the brain theory, but the wider implementation of the brain theory and its implementation as artificial intelligence actually influence those transforms I showed you earlier. So just find, I need to start another program. Now, those transforms I showed earlier of slide, scale, rotate, etc. Basically, those transformations are actually a part of the brain theory, but it's part of the brain theory in a fractal way. If I showed you this diagram here, and I'll show you another computer animation, a picture's worth 1,000 words and an animation is worth tens of thousands of words. But can you see, like, if that's a fractal tree again, now each of these blue squares represents a kind of square representing that node. So that's your kind of master node, represents the entire subnodes. And as you go down, you have a kind of like a square within that square. And as you go down, you have squares within the square. Now, imagine that I can shift, I can rotate, I can expand those squares, but it's fractal. So when I expand them, all the squares below also expand. But it's autonomous, because all the squares below can also autonomously shift, rotate, and expand. Now, I know it's really hard to visualize, so I wrote a computer program to visualize it for you. Shifting. So it's sliding about. So when the big square slides and all the squares inside it slide with it, but all the squares within it can also slide on their own accord within it, and then all the sub-squares below slide, etc. So it's shifting, shimmering, but now all the squares can also fractally scale. So you can see it's kind of expanding, contracting, and also squares can also rotate. What this is meant to show is that the brain theory and also the language to capture it is completely flexible, literally flexible. So you can represent things in a grid way, but the grids are completely flexible. You can basically, when you recognize things, you can recognize things distorted. You can actually, even though we process grids and digitize things, we can also distort those representations and we still recognize them. So what this means is that we use these transformations to give the base theory a flexibility which comes very handy when we come to implementing artificial intelligence. So the theory and the representation is literally flexible. Some bright sparks will say, well, what about hexagonals? What about kind of place cells, kind of hexagonal place cells in the hippocampus? What about those? Well, I mean, again, the mathematics of the eye. If that's a hexagonal grid, okay, I mean, as well, pictures worth 1,000 words. Basically, hexagonal grid, square grid. So you can map, other patterns onto this griddy square language. Okay, we are basically crossing over now, you see, from neuroscience into artificial intelligence. So now we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. Now, so we're going to shift the gear now, just to make a brief detour in the world of artificial intelligence. Now, already we have a language, a unifying language that unifies all brain structure, all brain process, fractal conception of the brain, and a formalism which is actually very succinct and actually describes all this brain structure in a very concise mathematical language. But also this language of binary trees is also the language of computer science, information theory, and artificial intelligence. So we basically bridged two separate worlds of brain science and artificial intelligence. So at the very least, this brain theory provides a new language for basically bridging two massive areas of science and technology. So also the approach allows us to unify existing approaches in artificial intelligence, because the main approach is neural nets or spatial temporal artificial intelligence. And because, as you saw earlier, we can represent neurons as nodes. I mean, we can link up different nodes through tree walks. And also logical and symbolic AI is basically all binary trees. I mean, Prolog logic systems, language systems, the way it's programmed artificial intelligence is through binary trees. And also what I call combinatorial AI, which is genetic algorithms. We're basically working directly in a language of combinatorial codes. So this conception allows us to basically unify these existing approaches in artificial intelligence in one succinct language. And okay, this is slightly more recondite, but many of the most exciting algorithms in AI and software technologies, such as, okay, I mean, this is drowning in detail. In the future, there will be talks specifically about computer algorithms and AI. I'll just make the claim now that some of the hottest technologies in computer science, things like data compression, what makes your MP3 music players and MPEG DVDs work. There's certain technologies and ideas behind it, and also certain recurring ideas in artificial intelligence. Now, the brain theory actually captures all these best ideas, some of the best ideas in AI and computer science, but does it in a completely fractal way. So it subsumes the existing technologies, but also fractalizes these technologies and gives it a kind of extra flexibility and power. Now, a common idea, which some of the biggest names in artificial intelligence, they all say this. They say that there's going to be no unifying concept, that intelligence is not a unitary thing. There's going to be no critical algorithm or no critical conceptual breakthrough that's going to give rise to artificial intelligence. They say basically intelligence is a multifaceted, disparate thing. There's no one single unifying idea or overarching theory of artificial intelligence that's ever going to emerge. And these are some of the biggest names in artificial intelligence that said things along these lines. What the brain theory shows, okay, I'm going to show some stunning points, is that these ideas are mistaken, that the entire brain theory reduces to a single recursive atom. Not only is the brain theory fractal and completely all-reducing of brain structure, but also the brain theory reduces to a recursive atom, that from this recursive atom and single recursive function, you can actually reconstruct the entire artificial intelligence and your kind of virtual digitized brain. Now, this sounds like an incredible claim until we realize that real brains emerge from a recursive atom called a fertilized egg. Now, okay, this is a bombshell. I'm going to drop a massive point. There's something behind the fractal brain theory, a huge idea behind the fractal brain theory, and it's in two parts. The brain theory reduces, this brain theory and this theory of artificial intelligence reduces to a recursive self-modifying atom. But the brain theory also shows that the process by which brains come into being, the process by which brains work, is actually one and the same. It goes further. The brain theory shows that the way brains work, the way brains come into being, i.e. neurogenesis and ontogenesis, the formation of our bodies, and also the process of evolution, is actually one process. There's a unifying symmetry and a unifying process which shows that all these seemingly three separate areas of science is actually one unified thing. It's a huge claim, and I'll go to explain, go some lengths to explain why this is the case. It's an important point, because it's like an E equals mc squared of the brain theory. If E equals mc squared was the kind of unification of energy and matter, before, people thought that energy and matter were two separate things. But suddenly, E equals mc squared showed as a single equation which showed that they're interchangeable. Energy is matter, interchangeable matter with energy. Also, the theory of relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity, showed that space and time were actually one thing, space-time. And also showed that matter and energy and space-time were also one thing. That's a huge integration of many ideas that people thought were separate. What the brain theory shows is three areas which people think are separate. Evolution of species, cosmic evolution. the actual forms come into being, i.e. bodies, etc., and also the way the brain works, is actually one single theory. Massive claims, so I have to substantiate this claim, because it's huge. So I have to go some ways to substantiate it, and it's huge, and it's being, need to get out there. Now, it's going to get slightly technical, but it's going to be worth the effort. Now, no equations. Okay, again, this mathematics of the eye to explain this huge, dramatic, world-changing point. It's really going to change the world. Okay, seriously. Mathematics of the eye, no equations. I'm going to show why you can see this underlying symmetry between these three areas. Now, look. Suppose, to put it as absolute simplest. Okay, this is a binary tree that's supposed to represent cell division. So fertilization becomes 2, becomes 4. Now, the main point is that basically when we divide, each of those paths is basically a selection of combinatorial space. So basically there's 4 ways of selecting 0 and 1, 2 bits. So each of these boxes is basically a path of traversing down this binary tree. So if 0 means I branch left and 1 means I branch right, 0, 0, which means I branch left, left to get there. And 1, 0 means I had to branch right and then branch left to get there. And each of these boxes represents every single combination of branching I can possibly do. The main thing is that each of these boxes, each of these 4 virtual neurons is a combinatorial code. Now, you can take this process to infinity just to make it simple as possible to make the point. Now, this diagram here is when I take those 4 virtual neurons that represent a combinatorial code. Now I link up these neurons laterally. So I've made 4 neurons, but now I'll link up the neurons laterally. So instead of going left and right, if I start from neuron 1, I can say neuron 1 can either represent a 0 or 1. And as I go along, the second neuron can represent 0 or 1. As I go along, the third neuron can represent 0 or 1. Now, the thing is, instead of left and right, we have 0 or 1. Well, the main point is, as I go 1, 2, 3, 4, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, this represents all the combinations of putting in 0s and 1 into these 4 virtual neurons. The main point is that as I link up across, I'm also creating all the combinatorial codes that these 4 neurons can represent. Now, the next diagram is exactly equivalent to the last one. Because it was exactly equivalent, but instead of left and right, it's gone past and future. But now this binary tree here is not representing 4 neurons that exist simultaneously. It's representing 1 neuron, and it's transitioning through 4 states of time, through 4 brain waves. Now, the same idea again. As I transition, that 1 neuron can be 0 or 1. Then in t plus 1, the next time interval can be 0 or 1, etc. But in these 4 time steps, the main thing is that as I link up as I loop back, rather, with the same neuron 4 times, then if that neuron can represent 0 or 1, again, I've created all the combinatorial codes, transitions, that 1 neuron can go through. You see a symmetry between kind of temporal looping, laterally connecting, and kind of flip that tree over that way, and neurogenesis. So with the mathematics of the eye, do you see a kind of pattern between creating combinatorial codes through cell division, creating combinatorial codes through laterally connecting up, and connecting, looping back a patch of neuron, a patch of cortex or single neuron, also create combinatorial codes. You see, there's this underlying symmetry between the way brains link up, the ways brains animate in time, but also the ways that brains come into being. But evolution is also the exploration of combinatorial codes, but genetic codes. So there's an underlying symmetry between how language that can capture the process of evolution and the process by which brains link up and animate in time, but also the process by which brains come into being, but also all bodies come into being. Now, okay, it gets deeper, it gets even more cosmic. Okay, this idea of the unity between E equals MC squared of the brain theory, huge unifying of ideas. Okay, that's what I just explained. With this language, and this language that unifies brain process, way brains come into being, way bodies come into being, and way bodies evolve, goes hand in hand with an idea that not only is the brain fractal and Russian doll nested, but the entire universe, okay, is also Russian doll and fractal. So now I have to quickly explain how the universe is completely fractal and also corresponds, how the brain theory completely extrapolates into society and the entire universe, and vice versa, the entire universe and society interpolates into the brain theory. Okay, this is going to be a staggering result, which I believe is where science is heading anyway, which I'll show you in a minute. Now we'll start from the very obvious, and then we'll go from the very obvious and undeniable to the more speculative. Now, it's undeniable that you start as a fertilized egg, you divide into 2, 4, 8, as we explained earlier. And then, as this process continues through bones, skin, sinews, and nerves, we become one entity. Surely we become one body, one integrated whole. But along the way, before all these things connect up and divide and connect up, there's competition at every level. As the cells divide and differentiate and evolve within our bodies, they compete with one another. At all stages in our formation of our bodies, there's a process of competition where things compete to do their job, and the best cells that survive and win a competition get the job. So there's a process of competition and linking up. And then through this process, our bodies come to being. But a singularity into the things that become bodies and humans. Now, on a planetary scale, the human race started from probably a breeding pair or a very small group of humans living somewhere in Africa. And compared to 7 billion people going on to 10 billion people, that's a singularity in Africa. Now, over thousands of years, these people spread out. They competed, obviously, sibling rivalry, intertribe rivalry, nature of red tooth and claw, basically there's competition at all levels. There's war, there's basically competition between humans. But there's also linking up, there's also cooperation. Humans form clans, form tribes, form kingdoms, form nation states, form trading blocks. And then we're heading into this kind of like global village. One of the issues of the age is this kind of global village going to become a global tyranny or something more just. But surely from a singularity, through this process of spreading out, dividing competition, and linking up together through the jumbo jet, internet, through mass communications, surely the world is becoming one place, one entity. Now, from the Big Bang singularity, again, a singularity of points, the universe expands, and then matter converges. And there's this idea in religion, but also in science and technology, that the entire universe becomes one entity, a cosmic Christ, a celestial Buddha, a universal Vishnu. This is not just religion. Ray Kurzweil, the technologist, talks about the same idea, and also Frank Tipler, the physicist, the same idea that the entire universe becomes one entity. In the same way, the human race doesn't become one peaceful global village or one horrible world tyranny through one step. There's basically intermediate steps of tribes, kingdoms, nation states. The universe doesn't become the cosmic Christ through one jump. There's basically planetary consciousnesses, interstellar consciousnesses, galactic consciousnesses, intergalactic consciousnesses to the absolute cosmic consciousness. Now, you see, what we have here is Russian dolls, that within the cosmic kind of whole is kind of intermediate consciousnesses to the unified planetary consciousness to life forms, human beings. The idea is basically that the universe is a Russian doll that actually reflects the processes of the brain and vice versa, and the brain reflects the processes of society in the universe, but also that the Russian doll of the universe also contains all the Russian dolls of our minds. So there's one all-encompassing cosmic Russian doll of all life and all consciousness. And this is a very ancient idea of the cosmic tree, this all-encompassing kind of unified structure of all existence. And this is the idea that corresponds with this equals mc squared of the brain theory. And what the theory gives is a kind of language to basically support this ancient idea. Now, what's of interest is basically what I call the new physics or the latest science is really converging with this idea. And I'll tell you why, because, okay, a fractal universe, this is the paradigm of the age. Fractals everywhere. Fractal forms are the norm in the universe. And complexity theory, this idea, a study of complex things, life, societies, etc. in science, and the quest for a unified theory of complexity. And also the idea of evolution as a master theory, this idea that evolution is the master. Some people even say that evolution is before the laws of logic. The laws of logic evolve, I don't believe it. I mean, some people believe that the laws of physics come out from the laws of evolution, and also that universes compete. So evolution as this master theory, it's almost as if, if evolutionists have rejected God, they've made evolution God. It's kind of idolatry, isn't it? I mean, basically, well, anyway, evolution as this master theory, but also the idea that evolution is going on in our brains is actually an idea in science right now. MEMS, neural Darwinism, genetic algorithms. Now, a huge paradigm which is really taking the science world by storm is the informational computational universe. And recent research has basically quantized space and time in the same way that energy is quantized, quantum mechanics. What I'd say is all these cutting-edge ideas in science, the new physics, is really convergent with the brain theory. Because if the brain describes this kind of cosmic information, this cosmic process, then really it is the complexity theory, this quest for a unified theory is the brain theory extrapolated to the universe. And if scientists see the entire universe as information and computation, what scientists are waiting to be told and explained to them is that this information of the universe is structured as knowledge. And evolution is an incomplete theory. If you extrapolate the brain theory, the brain is purposeful and meaningful. Things in our minds are meaningful and purposeful. So if you extrapolate the brain theory into the universe, then what you restore to science and cosmology is teleology, purpose and meaning. So it's a very kind of way of bringing back old ideas into the mainstream. What I'd say is all these ideas are really converging towards the formalism in which the brain theory is expressed and the metaphysics and cosmology which also goes with the brain theory. So I believe that the brain theory does have something to say about the universe, and this, even Roger Penrose suspects that something from biology will actually elucidate mysteries of the cosmos. And I need to get in the position to show scientists that this is it. Huge claim. Okay, it's going to get even huger. Okay, it's about to get even more dramatic now. Okay, you're going to shift into a whole nother gear. Okay, it's going to get really far out now. It's going to get really far out. Okay, so I'll save the energy for this last bit. This is the finale. Okay, this is the ultimate truth. This is what people had to join secret societies for years and years and to learn, and at the end of it, they didn't even necessarily get to learn it. So this is the biggest mystery in all of science and philosophy, and also the biggest secret in all history. And basically, it's consciousness. Okay, it's consciousness. Is you in this room right now, the mystery of consciousness. And we're going to explain it now. Okay, we'll explain mystery of consciousness. Okay, so it's good value, this talk, isn't it? Now, okay, this is it gets really far out. Okay, look. Scientists and philosophers really have trouble answering the mystery of consciousness, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to reduce consciousness to the brain, and they're getting nowhere. Basically, the working assumption is materialism. How does the brain give rise to consciousness? And the answer is it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to show you exactly why now. I've got a way of showing even scientists why consciousness doesn't reduce to the brain. It's the other way around. That the universe and all existence reduces to consciousness, and it reduces the one consciousness. The astonishing hypothesis that the mystery of consciousness and the mystery of God are one and the same. Now, this might seem obvious, because surely the properties of God, the Christ within, the Krishna within, the Allah close to you in your jugular vein, the Buddha within, seek holy text Adi Granth, the one God is all-pervading and alone dwells in the mind. So God is immanent, but yet God is transcendent, transcends physical matter in this universe, but untouched by the universe, untouched by all the goings on in the universe. Exactly the properties of consciousness. There's nothing more immanent to you than your consciousness, close to you than your jugular vein. But also, consciousness is transcendent. They can't reduce consciousness to physical matter. So the idea that there's one consciousness and that you are it, that God is one. The greatest commandment in Judaism, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. The greatest commandment in Christianity, because Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Bhagavad Gita, the super soul, God inside you, quote, appears divided, but is never divided, and is always situated as one. And the idea that God is one, but also we are one, that in Christ there's no Jew, there's no Greek, and there is no slave, for in Christ we're all one. That Allah has created you from one soul, that your creation and your resurrection is but that of a single soul, not otherwise, that somehow we are all one person. Even in a John Lennon lyric, I am he as you are he, and you are me, and we're all together. Okay, the guy's off his head, obviously, but I mean, he saw the truth. Described as a modern Gnostic. Okay, drank the kaikion and saw interesting things and wrote interesting lyrics, good songs. And then not so good songs. You had to recover from all the good songwriting inspired by what he took. Anyway, so God is one, we are one, the oneness of God and the oneness that we are is one and the same. So that's actually telling you that you're God, if you didn't know already. So that's the... Now I'm going to explain how it is that everyone's God now. Because it's not just saying it, we need to explain it now. I need to qualify, because some people here are going to say, but hey, I didn't learn this in RE, what are you talking about? This everyone is God thing. RE teacher didn't teach me. There's nothing about this in religion, surely. So I need to explain that there's two kinds of religion. There's what's called exoteric religion, what we normally understand as religion. This is what we see, churches, synagogues, mosques, etc., Bible, Bhagavad Gita, Quran. This is the aspect of religion where there is division, and also the aspect of religion which will never reconcile with science. And also the exoteric mysteries, exoteric religion also includes those many faceted aspects of religion that people dismiss and think that's all religion's about. So religion and all these aspects are true, but they're parts of the puzzle. That indeed, religion can be opium of the people, can be a way of controlling people, and way of a means of social cohesion. And also religion contains, in narrative form, astrological and astronomical phenomena. And then people say, oh, but that's all it is. That these are aspects and are not mutually exclusive. So religion is multifaceted and it's all these things. But it's also something that's completely been missed by most people, most the Hawkings of this world, the Dawkings, the John Grays of this world, the militant atheists, is an aspect called the esoteric side of religion. And it's basically, the esoteric side is alluded to in all religions, the hidden teachings of Moses, the hidden teachings of Buddha, Jesus in the Bible, the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven have been spoken in parables to everyone else. It's a mystery, so they're ever seeing, never perceiving, ever hearing, never understanding. It's an allusion to hidden mysteries. But when we go into these hidden mysteries, we see the truth spoken directly in the Sufi traditions, a favorite Sufi saying of Muhammad, man is my mystery and I am his mystery, for I am he himself and he is I myself. In the Gnostic Gospels of Thomas, Jesus says, drink from my mouth and you shall be as I and I shall be as you, and the hidden things to you shall be revealed. So in the hidden mysteries of religion, we have this idea that, yes, we have these prophets that claim to be God, but they're saying that everyone is God. And the reason why we have esoteric mysteries is because they're hidden, because one, in the past, if you said these mysteries, you were killed. So there's massive incentive not to say them. And also, for years, for all history, these mysteries could not be explained. That's changed. We can now explain fully, in a way that scientists and philosophers can understand, how it is that everyone's God now. And two things have happened to make this possible. One is a thing called the Mandelbrot set. Now, the one thing about materialism is that we have to account for the physical world. All the kind of traditions say that materialism is flawed. Philosophers, Descartes, Kant, Berkeley, they all say we can never know the physical world. We can only know our consciousness. Therefore, we can only assume that the physical world exists. We can never know it. And also in religion, Maya, Sannyata, that somehow it's illusory. Plato's cave. But we have to explain what's behind the illusion. We have to account for the physical world. Now, this has been very hard, and it's been kind of the stumbling block of idealism, the alternative to materialism. How do you account for the physical world? Now, a discovery in '75, the Mandelbrot set, really gives us an insight into the nature of the physical world. And it's actually the recovery of a very ancient idea. Now, the Mandelbrot set is basically a kind of very famous fractal. Now, if I told you, this is the overall Mandelbrot set, it's a mathematical object. Now, this mathematical object is infinitely complex, and it contains an infinity of information and detail. That's staggering. I mean, basically, that's the entire set. What I can do is I can zoom in on bits. Say the little box there, I zoom in on it, see? And then I zoom in on that. That little box there, I zoom in on it. I can do it to infinity, so I can keep doing it. Look up there, look, I can zoom in on it, etc., etc., etc. Now, what if I told you that entire Mandelbrot set, no smoke, no mirrors, nothing random going on, that entire infinity of information and detail is contained in a single equation. Now, it took Mandelbrot in the mid-70s to discover it, because you need to animate that equation thousands of times to render one pixel of the picture of the Mandelbrot set. So you couldn't do it by hand. You needed powerful computers to do it. And Mandelbrot happened to work for IBM, so he had access to powerful computers. Now, did he discover this, or did he invent it? Surely Mandelbrot didn't invent all this pattern. He couldn't have, could he? This infinity of beauty. So he must have discovered it. But if he discovered the Mandelbrot set, where did the Mandelbrot set exist before he discovered it? Now, the answer is it exists platonically or mathematically. There's a mathematical realm of existence where these objects exist. And the universe could end and re-begin again, but the Mandelbrot set will exist in this kind of transcendent mathematical realm and always exist. Now, there's a very simple idea that there is this idea of mathematical existence, but the idea that basically there's a close relationship between the universe and mathematics, a very ancient idea. Pythagoras, the ancient mystical sage, said that universe is a number. Galileo, the book of nature, is written in the language of mathematics. Isaac Newton, God is a mathematician. This recurring idea that somehow there's a close relationship between mathematics and the physical universe. Eugene Wigner, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in describing the physical world. Now, the proposition is that the nature of physical existence is mathematical. The reason why there's such a close relationship between mathematics and the physical universe, and also between kind of science and mathematics in the universe, is because the nature of physical existence and also is also the same as the nature of mathematical existence. And that's a very ancient idea, because it's the idea that the entire physical universe and all physical universes are contained in this equation of all existence, of all possible universes. And it's a very ancient idea. Now, some physicists even speculate that this equation exists. Paul Davies, in The Mind of God, talks about an equation that contains not just all the differential equations of laws of motion, etc., but also contains all the initial conditions from which you can calculate the universe from beginning to end. But also Pythagoras, we talked about earlier, who brought the mysteries from Egypt to Greece. The universe is a number. Now, Platonic existence, Plato is described as a Pythagorean. And then Plato's ideas were developed by the Neoplatonists. So lineage of ideas, Pythagoras, Plato, Neoplatonists, and Neoplatonist idea of the Logos found its way into the Bible. It's translated as the Word, and you often hear it in the Queen's speech. In the beginning, the first lines of St. John Gospel, Freemason favourite apparently. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word is God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Through the Word, all things were made. Without the Word, nothing was made that has been made. But when you understand the word logos comes from a lineage of ideas from the Platonists, Neoplatonists back to Pythagoras, then it's the same idea of this mathematical equation that contains all existence. What I'm saying is that basically with this logos, we render, in the same way we render animations, fly-throughs, the Mandelbrot set, we render subjective experience. That's me in this room looking at you now, that's you looking at me now, that's subjective experience. We render subjectivity, not physical reality. That physical reality is illusory. Now, in this diagram by Roger Penrose, he basically talks about three realms. Now, he does believe in the Platonic realm. Now, he talks about three realms. He talks about the physical world. He talks about a subjective mental world, and he talks about the Platonic mathematical world. What I'm simply saying is basically the physical world doesn't exist. That all we have is really the logos and the one consciousness creating subjective experiences with the logos. Now, this is a very shocking view of existence. It's a view of what physicists call block universe, means the universe from beginning to end, space-time, the entire universe from beginning to end as one object. Now, each of these dots would be all the consciousnesses in the entire universe from beginning to end. And the big dot at the end is the cosmic consciousness, celestial Buddha, universal Vishnu. And one dot for every single life form that's ever existed from beginning of the universe to the end of the universe. Now, that's the materialist view of the universe from beginning to end. But there's another view. And it's the idea that you take all the beads representing every single consciousness in the universe from beginning to end, and you string them out in a single chain of transmigration, such that basically the universe is made up of a single consciousness traversing eternity and experiencing all the things that these individual consciousnesses see, one lifetime, one experience at a time. Now such that at every point on the string, all these consciousnesses, all these life forms can experience themselves as being one with the universe and becoming one with God. Then it's not illusory, it's actually experience things as they really are. And fractal universe, fractal time, I can take any one of these beads and I can expand it out into a birth and a death of a life form, and each of these beads are themselves beads strung out, the days of a life strung out. So in the same way, fractal time, in the same way we as human beings sleep and awake to a new day, so it is that as God we die and awaken to a new life, and that's called reincarnation. And another common idea behind all the mystery traditions is reincarnation. So, reincarnation in Judaism, in Kabbalah, in Gnosticism, and in the Sufi traditions is another unifying idea. So reincarnation and the idea that one undivided, indivisible soul goes hand in hand. Now I realise I've made a really eccentric and extreme, presented an extreme idea. And it's so out there, it's almost like most people say it's insane. But I'm not trying to start a cult. I'm basically trying to really start like a revolution in mental conceptions. But what this explanation does, it opens the way for other forms of spirituality and mysticism, because you can water down the explanation to suit your tastes. So even though I believe in absolute monism, Advaita Vedanta, that everyone is God, you can take that same explanation, but you can actually modify it to your own tastes. But what it does do is it modifies, it kind of makes possible a kind of a resurgence of ancient mystical ideas that's completely reasonable. That's more reasonable than scientific worldview that exists today. So that's a huge thing and it's very hard to challenge as well. So basically we are talking about a complete revolution in mental conceptions in philosophy and science. Now, just to finish off, what we're talking about is basically a complete return of ancient mystery religion. That once you understand that mystery of consciousness and mystery of God are one and the same, and that the brain theory extrapolates to the universe and it was all one consciousness, what I'm claiming is that all the aspects of the brain theory in this table extrapolates into all the things in the universe. But then also, it brings back all these ancient mystical ideas once you understand it's one consciousness, and they've been talking about these aspects of God all along. I'm saying there's total correspondence with the brain theory, with the universe, as science understands it, and also with all these ancient mystery traditions and all these ancient mystical ideas. Now that's for another talk for another day. Now, okay, just to end. It's a stunning thing. But basically, it's come full circle. Do you know, it's a funny thing, because science and philosophy came from the mystical and the sacred and the religious. The people who started science, Einstein, religion without science is blind, science without religion is lame. Einstein also said, the sense of the mystical, the true source of all science. Isaac Newton wrote more about Kabbalah, alchemy, and prophecies than he did about science. He's been called the first scientist, but also the last magus. And also Pythagoras, who coined the word philosophy. In a sense, philosophy began with Pythagoras, but Pythagoras was uber mystic, worshipped as a living god in his own lifetime. Really the luminary of the Greek mysteries. And also, I can go on and on, Leibniz. I mean, all these kind of like people who really created philosophy were themselves mystics and people heavily into the mystery traditions. And also the Invisible College, which gave rise to the Royal Society, which has been called the midwife of modern science. No institution based in London has done more to promote the modern scientific method than the Invisible College. And the Invisible College was a Freemason meeting group led by Christopher Wren. And Freemasonry really is esoteric religion in symbolized form. And the ideas get through. So basically, we've come full circle in that science and philosophy came from the mystical and the transcendent, has basically paved the way for this kind of fractal brain theory to emerge, to bring about a complete return of the mystery and the sacred esoteric traditions. So science, far from being the enemy of religion, was all along its friend and helper, helping to dispel nonsense religion, the religion of superstition and false rituals, regulations, to pave the way for the return of the true religion. Isn't that a stunning ending? for the end of the age, this 26,000-year cycle. So basically, we rectify what's wrong with science, its purposelessness, its meaninglessness. We bring back the kind of like cooperation back to evolution, so selfish genes Darwinism. We reaffirm synergy, cooperation, and symbiosis. And also we fix what's wrong with philosophy. We revitalize a field that's lost its way. We basically wrap up philosophy because all philosophy reduces to two questions, and they are epistemology and ontology. Epistemology is the question, how do we know what we know? And basically all philosophical questions can be reduced to that. Why does the philosopher think he or she knows that? But that's not the last question, because we're still left to ask what's the nature of that which is asking the questions, nature of existence, ontology. So, okay, a theory of the brain really is the final word. A definitive theory of the brain is the final word on the question of epistemology. But what we've shown is basically definitive answer to the ontological question on the side of idealism. So basically, in a sense, we lay foundations for philosophy for the 21st century. And we bring about the complete return of the ancient mystery religions. So science, religion, and philosophy, basically the intersection is found at mind-brain consciousness. And what the fractal brain theory will bring about is a complete return and a full circle, a complete unification of science, religion, and philosophy. So it will be shown that the God in the gaps that science has not yet explained, mind, brain, consciousness, is really where the true God was waiting to be discovered and revealed all along. And also, it will be shown that the newest of the new, the most modern of the most modern, the cutting edge of science in the form of a final brain theory, and the absolute bleeding edge of high technology in the form of artificial intelligence, and the advent of the technological singularity, is also the return of the oldest of the old, the most ancient of the most ancient, the perennial, eternal, indeed sacred and transcendent. That, the end of this 26,000-year cycle, how did the 2012 awakening happen? Maybe it happened because a way was found to explain to people why they were asleep in the first place. And also, this idea that these ideas can really kind of start a revolution in mental conception. To conclude, 2012, fractal brain theory, a kind of revelation of mind, brain consciousness coming soon to a planet near you, coming this year, 2012, end of the age, latter days of latter age. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.